Dragonflight set the doomsday clock in motion. The war within will hasten its pace, and in midnight it shall strike. Midnight is the second expansion of Warcraft's World Soul saga, and it's an ambitious one. A conclusion to the light and void narratives that Blizzard have spun since the Burning Crusade. A return of Ashara, reuniting lost elven tribes, and our first modern subcontinent revamp. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. You're going to learn how we get to this expansion, all the plot threads Blizzard are weaving together, and essentially what it's going to look like. And let me tell you, after marking this piece as done, I am more excited than when I started. So let's begin this video, which took days and days of work across 4 people and was funded by today's sponsor. MeUndies. Here's the deal. They make the most comfortable underwear and loungewear that there is, and given that the lovely country of Northern Ireland has not quite figured out about air conditioning yet, and we basically have humid, swampy summers, well, that kind of makes all of their strengths even better. You see, down to the materials, right? They have this micromodal fabric that is breathable, it's quick drying, moisture wicking, and anti-odor, which is obviously exactly what you want for this kind of thing. If you want to check them out, you can go to MeUndies.com/Bellular, because over there, you'll get 20% off your order and free shipping. So their underwear is top notch, but it's also fun. I mean, look at how many print options there are here. Now, why do I have beavers? Well, it's because I think beavers are just great wee lads. We've got dinosaurs, if you maybe want to blaze it and get some other funky patterns, you can, or you can go for the sort of standard, and you'll obviously be getting fantastically comfortable underwear. Now, whether you want boxers, briefs, anything like that, they've got it, even the likes of the ball caddy, to allow for additional inventory management. All their gear is super comfy, it's responsibly sourced from partners that take care of their workers, and if you're not happy with your first pair, they will cover it. These are the most comfy that I've worn. I'm very happy to have them, especially as we come into the summer, and you can hit up MeUndies.com/Bellular and you can prep your nether regions for the summer with 20% off your first order and free shipping. By the end of the War Within, we will discover a lot more about Azeroth's World Soul. That is what the Coreway and its protectors are all about, the World Soul. But for our purposes today, there are 2 main things with the War Within expansion. One, the light crystal of Hallowfall, and the clash of Illyria and Xal'atath. The crystal first. It has a light state and a void state, one that essentially provides day and night to the denizens of Hallowfall. But what is it? Well, in my view, it is some sort of powerful weapon of the light sent down to the world. It changes states from light to void, just as Naru can, though light does seem to be its ideal default. To those who saw it as a falling star and decided to travel across the ocean to find and defend it, it is obviously some form of religious item. That's why they defend it. But of course, it didn't just fall. It was evidently aimed. And when we take a look at where it landed, it's obvious. It landed near the Coreway, which is the literal passage to Azeroth's World Soul. In this expansion, if the Nerubians claim it, we'll be in deep trouble. Now, we've seen what happens when light turns to void. It's an immense type of power, and that's why the Nerubians are drawn to it. Obviously, in Xal'atath's hands, it could be something game-changing. This is set up to be the thing that everybody wants to get their hands on, and in a way, it serves as a parallel to Midnight itself, an expansion where everyone wants to get their hands on a light-aligned font of power. Remember that while yes, the Sunwell was created using a vial of the Well of Eternity's waters, by the end of the Burning Crusade, we saw it purified with the heart of Muru, imbuing it forever with light. And if the War Within's light crystal is something that will echo forward into what happens with the Sunwell, well, funnily enough, Season of Discovery Phase 1 has a similar thing. It saw a shadowy figure, likely to be Xal'atath, investigating another, albeit far smaller, light crystal that fell to Azeroth. So this then is our first thread. Powerful objects, powerful fonts of the light that our foes wish to claim. And when I look at what they're doing in Season of Discovery, I mean, in the business, we call that foreshadowing. Our second thread concerns their lead defender and her home. Illyria Windrunner is, in fact, the first elf ever named in the canon, and she will be key to Midnight. Her death, be that literal or metaphorical, is prophesied to bring about our end. So here's a brief version of her story. Illyria left Quel'Thalas to fight in humanity's war against the Orcs. She then jumped through the Dark Portal alongside her husband and the Alliance's greatest, and they fought a campaign that ultimately succeeded in defending Azeroth, but they were unable to return home. It ended with the destruction of Draenor, an event that she and her husband Turalyon narrowly avoided by fleeing into a twisting nether tear. Soon, they were rescued by Lothraxion, and that's when they joined the Army of the Light, a band of light fanatics led by the Prime Naru Zira. Illyria would soon receive visions of the Void and even meet Locust Walker, a Void ethereal who we can assume is independent of the Void Lords. She rejoins our story in Legion, and during the Argus campaign, she would actually consume a Dark Naru, really taking the Void into the core of her being. The epilogue of the Legion expansion also has a direct connection to the War Within and Midnight. I'm going to explain how. Il'gynoth is an old god-aligned being that teased us, that whispered prophecy. And here's a prime example.
The King of Diamonds has been made a pawn.
Back in the day, we spent ages wondering if somehow Magni could be corrupted, if something had went wrong. But the answer is far more simple. Magni Bronzebeard, the Speaker of Azeroth, is quite literally just a pawn in the Titan's plan, because he serves Azeroth. Well, does he serve Azeroth, or does he serve the Titan's purposes for Azeroth? Again, thinking about all of the Titan machinery and all of the Titan keepers and watchers and things that he works with. And while not connected to the subject of this video, that is one example of an Il'gynoth prophecy and how it now very much does make sense. Our next whisper, though, is where Illyria comes in. Take a listen to this.
At the hour of her third death, she ushers in our coming.
There have been many theories about this, but in reality, Illyria is the only character who directly told us that she felt like she had died twice before. Once in Draenor, and once again when she absorbed the void-twisted Lura on Argus. So a third death for her is not hard to imagine. She is a main character in the next expansion, and she's set in direct opposition to Xal'atath. So, Xal'atath, Illyria, the Crystal. Whatever happens between them will spark the Midnight expansion. But to introduce it completely, we need another, far more recent prophecy, and it is called the Song of the Depths. The Song of the Depths concerns Ashara's return to Azeroth, and to understand that, we must examine her last appearance in the story, which was in Ny'alotha. After being freed, Ashara proclaims that she is done, that she is finished with intermediaries and heralds. And this is clearly referring to her old master, N'Zoth, who would have been a ostensibly servant of the Void Lords. Now, after saying that, Ashara disappears through a void portal, and the question was, where did she go? At the time, we speculated she essentially wanted to go one rung up the void ladder, that she wanted to go from old god to void lord, that she had some sort of insane plan, one fitting her raw power and ego. The thing is, Shadowlands almost told us where, but Dragonflight confirmed it. First, I've got to do a fun fact. The old Shadowlands meta achievement title is Veil Strider, and canonically a veil in Warcraft is the boundary between our reality and a cosmological realm, a bit like with the Shadowlands, or what we call the Emerald Dream. Now, we've long known that these other realms exist, like for years and years and years. I mean, the Void Lords had to be somewhere, right? Now, Shadowlands made this very clear with the introduction of Zereth Umbra. So, a veil is a boundary. As an example, the Shadowlands cinematic was called, I believe, Piercing the Veil. They've continually talked about that. So with that understanding in mind, I will now read from A Song of the Depths. Rise, rise, our queen calls to us from beyond the umbral veil. She has transcended the circle of stars and basks in her eternal grandeur. The time we have long awaited is nigh. Even now, the Harbinger gathers the children of the first flesh to reclaim what was lost. They must remember their vows and serve those whom they owe fealty. This is quite a piece, and that's not all of it, but we'll start here. Now remember, this was revealed to us on the Forbidden Reach. That was just before we glimpsed Xal'atath through that portal in Dawn of the Infinite. So, this is a Naga piece, and it is all talking about Queen Ashara. It says that she is beyond the Umbral Veil. Umbral, of course, translates to shadow, and before you think, oh dear, Shadowlands, no. Ashara's not there going to Zoval's corpse or some goofy thing that none of us want. Look at this original cosmological chart. You can see Void, Shadow. Yeah, the naming's a bit funky, but it's Void. It also speaks of a Harbinger gathering the children of the First Flesh, so that is quite obviously what Xal'atath had been up to at that time, and of course it has since been confirmed that Xal'atath is the Harbinger of Dementius, who is the only named Void Lord in the Warcraft canon. The song continues, and it later states that these things will come to pass before the Naga Queen returns. The Harbinger speaks of a primal power that seeks the end of order. Such rage can be bent to serve our ends. A hunger lost to the ages will be reclaimed. A dark heart left broken awaits the taking. Okay, we've seen each of these in Dragonflight. Xal'atath's alliance with Iridikron, the claiming of Galakron's essence into a relic named Dark Heart, and indeed patch 10.2.7 is titled Dark Heart. There is, however, one final thing the prophecy states will happen before Ashara returns, so let us return to the song. When these things come to pass, the Harbinger will fulfill the final prophecy and complete the awakening. Only then shall our queen return to reign over sea and sky and earth. We must make ready. And there we have it, the awakening. I believe this is the core event of the War Within. Be it Azeroth, Dementius, or something totally different, I think when Xal'atath completes this goal, Midnight will begin, and when it begins, Ashara will return. And knowing Ashara, she won't be returning to help. It will be to claim what she has always believed she is entitled to, Azeroth. Us, Ashara, the Light, the Void, they all want to claim Azeroth, and it's clear that the Sunwell will help them do it. And with that, it's time to talk about the lands of Quel'Thalas and the sorts of things that will happen in the Midnight expansion. I do have one quick tidbit though. The Dragonflight Season 4 raid affixes are titled Awakened. So, yeah, the Awakening, Awakened. I think we can all see the direction things are going. If the patch cycle of World of Warcraft keeps up its blistering pace, then each expansion in the saga will bring us a capital city, 4 launch zones, and 2 patch zones. And when thinking about a revamped Quel'Thalas in the mold of the modern game, I think it's rather clear what we'll get. The Isle of Quel'Thanas, Eversong, Ghostlands, and the Ammani Troll lands, all greatly expanded. And when you go to not their in-game portrayal, but their canon, what they're like in the lore, it gets exciting. To give you a sense of scale, let's look at a modern depiction of Quel'Thanas. In Chronicle, the Sunwell Isle is a glittering city rising from the sea. In-game, it's a decently small raid. Now take a look at its counterpart, the Nightwell. It is the pinnacle of Nighthold, with aqueducts sending energy throughout the city. The Sunwell is the same, but it uses the runestones in Eversong to channel its energy, and those will be relevant. But the point is here, this is a chance to render Quel'Thanas with the layers of Borealis, the energy of Suramar, a scale that actually matches its importance. And of course, with the game's modern movement mechanics, a proper opportunity to play with verticality or to delve underground to discover the arcane machinery that maintains the Sunwell. But let's return to those runestones. You may not have heard of them, but trust me, they're a hanging plot thread, and they almost certainly will play a major role in the Midnight expansion. You see, the Old Horde destroyed many of them, and the Scourge destroyed many more. Only a few remain. They were built essentially to shield Quel'Thalas' energy from interdimensional forces, which, in other words, essentially means the Legion. The point there being that whenever the Kaldori Society went just a little bit crazy when using the Well of Eternity's magics, it basically just was a big magical beacon telling the Legion, hey, come here, there's a lot of power. So they built these runes to essentially prevent that from happening again. This time round, of course, it isn't the Legion, it is Void. Void wants to claim the Sunwell, it wants to turn it purple. So a question is, can we rebuild this network Will the champions of the Void Invasion be trying to destroy these seals? I think it's something that's going to happen. Are the Ghostlands once again a land of eternal springtime? I mean, it would be unfortunate to see that legacy completely die. I would rather see a patchwork of perhaps Forsaken cleansing out the Scourge, Windrunner Tower reclaimed by maybe Illyria, if she survives the War Within, maybe the Void Elves having more of a home there. Enough grassroots stories exist here to let Quel'Thalas breathe without everything being consumed with a massive Void War. And one of those plot points is a resurgent Ammani Empire. Their village, Torwatha, has huge gates leading to the east. These were replaced in the Cataclysm, but that's evidence that the Ammani lands were intended to be much bigger than they ever were in the game. Currently, they are a handful of huts in the Ghostlands, but in the game's lore, it's a vast forest that covers half of Quel'Thalas, a tangle of wood and temple that the High Elves were never able to fully conquer. Up until the Ammani went all Drakari and started sacrificing their gods to fight Blood Elves, they were still a major and powerful empire. They're likely still out there, and that brings up a question. Who will they side with in the Midnight expansion? Will they, as some people have suggested, be an allied race? In the Battle for Azeroth expansion, the Ammani and Zuldazar despised the Horde, but they still did serve the Zandalari. Or will they take the dark path of Hex Lord Malakras and accept whatever bargain is offered by the Void, if taking that bargain means they get their lands back and they end the Elves, one of their historical allies? There's more than that, though. Buried underneath Zulaman is the corpse of the Cathaxi general Cathix. He helped slay Tyr and was later awakened by Xal'atath to fight a war against the Trolls. And this isn't just any war. I'm not going to go into it, but it was of a pretty insane scale. And it is in fact that war that led to the Akir spreading across the world, and that led to the rise of the Nerubians, who of course we will deal with in the War Within. So you can see how a lot of these things are surprisingly quite well connected. Now you can go and look at our Xal'atath video to see how this Cathaxi was key to Xal'atath's ancient plans, so who knows? Maybe she once again could awaken this ally, and maybe in doing that, the Ammani could be bent to serve her will. But let's return to the main event, the Void Invasion. How is it going to happen? Are the Void Elves the lost elven tribe that were talked about by Blizzard, or is that something else? I mean, they were banished from Quel'Thalas by the Silver Moon Magi because any tampering with the Void around the Sunwell could have dire consequences. They were hardcore about that, and does that suggest the Magisters of Quel'Thalas know something? As an example, the Naru Muur used to be drained of light to power the Blood Knights. That's how the Horde were able to be paladins in the Burning Crusade. But by the end of the Burning Crusade, Muur was defeated, and its core essentially was used to cleanse the Sunwell, and that means that the Blood Elf Paladins can now properly use the light. But the thing is, the core of a Naru can turn void. That is what Illyria herself consumed in Argus. So, what happens if the Sunwell turns? Could it end up being the Void's gateway? Or perhaps the invasion may come from a different group, the Ethereals. Do you remember the Shadow-scrolled coin that you found in your adventure journal at the start of Dragonflight? That was clearly Blizzard playing with us. Locust Walker, mentor of Illyria, is not the only Void Ethereal of interest. There's also Shadreen, who has been following us for years now, examining how we dress, how we fight, and how we adventure. And it wasn't just out of her own interest. She was gathering information for a mysterious master. Now, as Locust Walker is the only known independent Void Ethereal, I think it's likely that Shadreen's master is tangled up with the Void Lord's plans for Azeroth. And of course, that's not the only Ethereals. We met a great many Void Ethereals with all of their spaceships and their portals during our campaign on Argus. Those guys are still out there. And that brings me to what I think may be a patch zone of this expansion. Okay, so the Void Lord Dimensius is known as Xal'atath's patron, and he is also the reason why the Ethereals now wander the cosmos without a home. It's because their planet, Karesh, became void and arcane ravaged, a wasteland after Dimensius physically manifested there. Now, Dimensius returned to our lore recently with the Void Song's staff, the Staff of Xal'atath, which does point to his personal involvement with the Harbinger. So all of this lore, I think, is circling around a trip to Koresh. And in true Champion of Azeroth style, this would be a chance to bring the fight back to the Void. Argus was an incredible patch experience, so imagine if we went to Koresh, the true home of the Ethereals. That would be absolutely incredible, but it would be an excursion, and the true war would be fought for Azeroth, so let's get to that. When talking about this expansion, Chris Metzen said that this is the ultimate clash between light and dark. So where does the light fit in? All the big hitter characters we've talked about are Void aligned so far, so let's talk about the light. The light really has taken a back seat since the Legion expansion. Even Anduin has somewhat set it aside. There's Turalyon, who's the regent of Stormwind, but I think any chance of him shaking the boat was settled in Dragonflight. Without a faction conflict, he's just, being the caretaker of the throne. Valen is still about, but he's from Argus, and this is about our world soul. I'm sure he'll help a lot, but maybe there's going to be someone a little closer to things. I think that means we have to look at the War Within. Whatever happens in Hallowfall with that light crystal will have huge consequences for the history of the light on Azeroth. You see, Maraldar, the capital of the Arathi, is named after the woman who was visited by an unknown Naru and taught about the light. Some of her followers ended up going to Hallowfall, called to crusade by the same crystalline figures that taught Maraldar the light. So who is that Naru? So far, we essentially are talking about an unknown group of Naru who have been guiding the destiny of humanity for thousands of years. What's going on with them? I don't know, but they certainly would seem to be the same group that launched the Hallowfall crystal at Azeroth. And again I ask, what was the point of that crystal? It was obviously aimed at the World Soul, and this is where I want to bring the Sunwell back into things. So the Sunwell was created by Dathomir Sunstrider when he poured a vial of water taken from the Well of Eternity before its destruction in there, right? Now, this essentially at the time was being portrayed as a massive font of arcane energy. It's now essentially like world soul energy, you could sort of say, right? It's like directly from Azeroth. Now, this is where things get interesting. When Yasharj was pulled from the planet, the resulting wound basically damaged the world soul, and that made it hemorrhage Azerite until the Titans shaped the wound into the ordered, sort of arcane energy Well of Eternity. Now, going back to the Sunwell, okay, the thing that made it so powerful was that spark from the Well of Eternity, and that is a spark from our world soul, right? Now, because the light has been put into the well by the Naru, as of the end of the Burning Crusade, in a way that means it's now ripe to be corrupted by the Void. And if that happens, the Void will control a portion of the world soul's power. When we think about the cleansing of the Sunwell, right, those events that happened at the end of the Burning Crusade, that was clearly of rather great religious importance, right? But at the end of the day, that religion, the Naru are happy to be worshipped. They are happy to be seen as holy beings because that means that us, we kind of do things that they would want. So, yes, we gave them an in with something essentially that was powered by Azeroth's sort of world soul, right? They flung their crystal at the world soul. And every time, as Alatath said, she sees the Naru as long-lost brethren. So at every time that the light would try to gain purchase in Azeroth, that is also an opportunity for the Void to flip it to their favor. And while those two essentially battle it out, we're going to be stuck in the middle. And ultimately, this is all part of the plan. Iridikron wants to force the Titans back. He wants them to return. And I think that if the Void gets further than any other force, that will force their hand. Pretty exciting. And hey, perhaps we'll learn whatever the fuck was going on with that goddamn Sarkareth boss room, with its chains, with its big circles everywhere, and I mean, come on, what was going on? I don't know, but if you want another video to watch, check out this. This video is basically Xalatath, her entire story. I think it would be a perfect complement to this, so I will see you over there. Thanks to you for watching, thanks to our sponsor for funding today's episode. Go enjoy Xalatath. Take care.